be like, hey girl, slow down. You probably have to pull that closer to you.
There's the
Is that better? How's that? Better? I'm not used to a microphone. I usually talk with my hands, so hopefully I don't knock it down. Will be good. But as Brandon said, my name is Kelly. I'm the Regional Autism Coordinator with the Department of Mental Health. And we've actually had this program since I've been working with the department since 2018. We started taking applications. You can't hear me. I may just have to hold this. Is that better?
yes.
Okay. If I start doing this, I'm sorry. I'll try my best. But I started the department in 2018. Before that, I've worked in nonprofits. I've worked in private sector, for-profits, other government agencies. I'm a BCBA by training. So that's what I did for many, many moons. And then there was this opportunity, and so I jumped on it. Unfortunately, the state got sued because of a lack of coverage, which I'm sure you guys run into all of the time. So it's unfortunate that that's the way we came about, but I'm glad that I have a job and that now you have more services. So I want to do a presentation tonight. We'll talk a little bit about autism in general, and then maybe some tips and tricks and tools that you can use at home, and then also some services and supports that are available to you. So how many of you have trouble with relating to kids in general, but especially kids with autism? I guess, is that a thing? Yeah. Story of my life. And I've worked with kids with autism for a long, long time, and everyone's still a new adventure. So it's always learning to relate to them. So basically, when we can relate to somebody, we're able to provide better services to those individuals. So I'm sure that you have kids in your house that wish they lived on Pizza Planet. I think I would sometimes too. But you probably think sometimes that they live on the other side of the moon, or maybe a galaxy far, far away, or maybe they make you want to go to the dark side sometimes with those behaviors that you see. But even good guys come from lands far, far away. But with lots of training and education and practice, and even though I've been doing this for 15 years, still trying to find new techniques, so it's never the same. Don't get discouraged. But maybe you can feel more like this guy. You won't have all the answers, but maybe you'll know the way. So no matter who you're working with, no matter which kiddo's living in your home, if you can try to understand them, it makes the road a lot easier. So autism basically has a couple of diagnostic criteria that you can see here. The main things are either deficits in social communication and relationships. So this can be conversations with people, having mutual understandings of feelings with individuals. It also includes nonverbal communication. A lot of kids on the spectrum do not understand social cues well. So you don't know why in the world they don't get this, or when you turn your back and they just keep on and keep on, they don't know what that means. They don't naturally pick up on it like a lot of individuals do. So obviously this impacts relationships. The second set of diagnostic criteria tends to have more to do with what we call restrictive and repetitive behaviors. You might know these as like stereotypy or stereotypic behaviors. It's motor movements, so it's anything from hand flapping to clapping to they may just do things like this. You may get the kid that stares out the side of their eye at you, never really making full eye contact. And they also sometimes are really rigid in routines, or they want to do certain things when plans change. That can be really hard for them because they want to follow a schedule. They may know every president, where they were born and how long they lived, but they may not be able to recite their ABCs. So it really gets restricted sometimes what they can talk about. That also makes relationships hard because if all you want to talk about is space and all I want to talk about is Barbie dolls, we're going to have a real hard time unless I got astronaut Barbie in my box. And then sensory issues, which I'll get into more later. So you mix it all up and you're only going to get one individual with autism because, like you've probably heard, one individual with autism, you've met one individual with autism. I used to think that was the dumbest thing I ever heard until I worked with about 3 different kids, and then 30 different kids, and then 300 kids. And although this one may be a little bit like that one, they're never the same whatsoever. So Basically right now we're seeing autism on the rise. So this is kind of a surveillance study that's done by the CDC. And it's a target group of kids who are 8 years old that they follow every 2 years. And so you can see that in 2000 it was 1 in 150. In 2016 it was 1 in 54. It went to 1 in 48. And now it is actually 1 in 44. So with that, we've seen a lot of increase in the area that we live in as well. North Alabama actually has one of the highest incidents of autism in all of the country. So you may notice that when you're trying to get diagnostics or get services, that creates a lot of wait lists. And unfortunately for individuals who may have Medicaid coverage, the sources are even more limited because not a lot of providers accept those. So right now in Alabama, over 11,000 kids with Medicaid coverage alone have an autism diagnosis, and that number is growing every year as well. So talking back about some of those criteria that we talked about, I want to hit on a few areas where we get the most concerns, or I don't want to say complaints from parents, but the things that drive them the most crazy or present the most trouble in their homes, everyday life. So the first part tends to be communication, and this can be frustrating for parents, families, friends, the kiddos themselves. But we can break communication down into 2 pieces. So the first piece is receptive communication, and that's how individuals understand what you're saying to them. So when you're giving them instructions to get their shoes, or it's time to take a bath, or you read a book, all of that is receptive communication. So it's understanding the input of others. And then we also have expressive communication, which is when they're trying to communicate to you. And expressive communication doesn't have to be just words. So you could have verbal communication, which would be using words. You could have vocal communication, that's more sounds, that maybe still have a communicative purpose. You also have body language, and then a lot of kiddos with autism who may have speech delays use what we call AAC. It's also known as augmentative communication devices. So that may be an iPad that they carry around with them. Sometimes there's these big complex systems. And sometimes it's just cards, like they can show you a card for what they want. But all of those fall under what we call AAC. But the purpose of all of them is so that these individuals can communicate what they need, whether that's food or a nap or a hug. It also allows them to communicate how they feel, what they think, things they know. If it's just stuck inside of them, you never know what they know or what they need. And all of that's really important to building relationships. All right, so looking specifically at communication, here are a couple of examples of some AAC that you might see. So if you don't have verbal language, like we talked about, if you don't have those words, there's barriers to communicating with people, but we can address those. So one thing that could be as simple as a little whiteboard. Can they write what they want to say? We have a lot of individuals that we have found when we work with them that can read, they can spell, they can write. And if we never tried, we wouldn't have known. But they just can't get those words out. There's a disconnect between their brain and their mouth, and so they don't have that speech. And for some kids, it's also other things like trauma or anxiety that may cause either mutism or selective mutism, but they do sometimes have that inside of them. So you might try writing it. Some kids can draw. This is used a lot also, like in play therapy. Draw me a picture, kind of about what's going on, or what are you thinking about, what do you want to do. Sometimes kids can draw that. Sign language, obviously, is another way that people can communicate. I try to give people a sidebar warning on sign language. Typically ASL is going to be American Sign Language, so as long as you're not traveling abroad, that's not a big issue. But a lot of people don't know sign language, and a lot of kiddos with autism have fine motor deficits. So making some signs is really difficult for them, and families sometimes will take modified signs. Well, when they get out in public, even if somebody knows ASL, they don't know your kid's modified sign. And what they sign may actually mean something else, which can be very frustrating. So make sure that if you do use modified signs, that whoever is working with your kiddo knows what those signs are. This is an example of picture communication that I was talking about. This is a very simple version. It's really just pictures. You can laminate it. They could be individual cards, and they can either present a card to you or point to a picture of kind of things that they want or need or they see. Like I said, this also can come on things like iPads or other devices, so that way they can communicate as well. This is great because it's easy to carry. It's on the go. A lot of these kiddos know how to function with technology really quickly. I think straight out the womb sometimes these days. They got a better idea of doing things than I do. But got to make sure it's charged. So if you're going to use something like an iPad for communication, make sure you've always got a charger, you're always charging that battery, or that you have a backup method as well. Because if something goes wrong, all of a sudden they don't have communication, and you're likely to see an increase in some of those maladaptive behaviors. And then just along with communication as well, there's even things like phones. There's lots of programs where kids can do talk to text, type to text. And for older kids, even if they're nonverbal, this can be really great because it's age appropriate. Not that I encourage kids not to talk to each other or adults, but if a kid's just sitting there on their phone with another group of teenagers or kids, and that's how they're communicating with somebody, nobody's ever going to know the difference. They're going to look like a very typical individual that age. So that covers a lot of the expressive, but sometimes with the receptive, we also have struggles, and so we need to implement ways to modify that so that we can better communicate what we want or need or expect from individuals on the spectrum as well. So sometimes these look like schedules. We call these visual schedules. They can be individualized very much to every individual, every environment. You can go online and find 1,000,001 pictures of anything that you wanted. I've even had to go on and find mom's exact car for certain kiddos because a picture of a little toy car did not indicate that I was getting in the car to go home with mom. So we printed off mom's, 2004 white Honda Civic 4-door with a spoiler. It was very important that it was mom's car. So these can be as specific as they need to be, but you could use visual schedules for morning routines, for bedtime routines, for what you're going to do during the school day, what you're going to do while you're on vacation. So first we're going to go to Magical Kingdom, we're going to see Mickey, we're going to ride the little dwarf gold mine ride, then we're going to go over here to Peter Pan. You can get it's broken down as you need to. It just takes some planning on the front end. Also, we have first in charts, so maybe it's something that can be just a little more direct. So you need your kiddo to take a bath, and then you can get on the iPad. First, you're going to do your homework, then you can go play outside. Obviously, there's a simple one here that's just a first then. You can also do first then, first then finally, whatever works for your kiddo and however many steps they need to go out. We can also do what in the ABA world, we call it task analysis, but it's really just breaking down a basic task or event that you need to do. So I don't know if you guys know this, but typically brushing your teeth is about 41 steps and putting on a shirt is 26. You probably just think, I threw on my shirt. Or maybe I put in my arms and then I put in my head and I was done. But it's actually a lot more steps than that. So you can break down something into minute detail of what you need them to do. And for some kiddos, they need that detail for each step, and it can help you teach stuff in smaller steps, or it can just remind them to do all of the steps. Maybe they just forget to put the cap back on the toothpaste, and then the dog jumps up there and it squirts everywhere, and every day you're cleaning toothpaste off the mirror and you're just tired of it. Maybe we can just put a little picture in there that's put the cap on. And so we can do stuff like that. Another tip from experience is if you want to use things like visuals or task analysis or schedules or anything in the bathroom, you can laminate them and they're magically waterproof. So that way they last a lot longer. You can actually stick a shower routine or a bath routine right there on the wall of the shower, and it's waterproof and safe. So even if they grab it and dunk it in the water, you're just going to dry it off and keep on going. You have kids that like water that are on the spectrum. We see that a lot. So, also, visuals can be used to communicate things like expectations and rules. Classrooms use these all the time, and they don't even know sometimes the theory behind it. But these work as well in the home. So if they have a kiddo that likes to dart out the door, sometimes you can print little stop signs, and they know that the stop sign means stop, and at least it can slow them down enough for you to get there to intervene before they hop out the door. So you can use all kinds of things like this in the house. You can put little signs by the lights that says, you know, lights off, so when they're walking out the room, they see that sign, they might turn the lights off. And then timers can be really useful. These can be mechanical timers like the one in the picture, but nowadays if the kids are going to be toting around a phone or an iPad anyway, you can turn a timer on there. There's also lots of visual timers that they can see when the green starts to run out or the red starts to run down. Individuals on the spectrum tend to be very visual learners, so sometimes seeing that actual countdown, seeing the 5 minutes means more than just hearing 5 minutes. But sometimes communication obviously is not the only problem based off that second set of criteria that we talked about. And sometimes for the language pieces, you can get things like speech therapy and stuff like that to really help. And so a lot of times the families have more trouble with the sensory issues, with the schedule, rigidity, things like that. So what can you do if that is your biggest thing? We often use things called social stories. Have any of you ever seen a social story, used a social story? Yeah. Again, those can be made as individualized as you need to make them. You can make a social story about anything. You can go on the internet and find social stories about most things. But really all it takes is a Word document and a little bit of Google image searching, and you can make basically anything that you need to make. There's also a lot of apps where you can build social stories. But a social story is basically just a brief story. It's usually like a 1 to 3 pager about an upcoming event, or a lot of times something that's going to be changing in the environment, whether that's a schedule change or we're going to go on vacation, you're getting a new babysitter. It's things that can really break that down. We use social stories a lot during coronavirus when the world was shut down because it seemed like every day something was changing for these kiddos. So it was social stories about wearing a mask, about getting a vaccination, about staying at home, about now mom's going back to work after you just got used to mom being at home all the time. We're going to rock your world one more time. So we use social stories a lot for these kiddos. Again, you can use basic pictures. You can use really specific pictures. Again, I had my one friend that if we were going to a doctor's appointment, it was the picture of mom's Civic. We were going to get in mom's little Civic and we were going to drive to the doctor, and I would have to Google a picture of the actual doctor's office that we were going to, but then he would do fine. So there are social stories. You can also do modeling. And so with modeling, that's really just you showing them how to do the skill. Sometimes it'll work fine if you do the skill. Sometimes if it's something you want to do with a peer, it's better to have a peer model it. Because they're like, oh, they're like me, and I can be like them. So that can be really useful. Sorry guys, but you can do modeling with all kinds of skills. You can model social skills, you can model independent living skills. And then you can also do role play, which is kind of building on that modeling piece. So you're going to practice it, you're going to talk about it, you're going to model it, and then you're going to practice it, and then we're going to practice it some more. And then once we learn to do it really good with sister, we're going to practice it with brother, and then we're going to go practice it with our cousin, and then we're going to do it with that kid at church. Because the more that we try it with different people, the better we're going to get at doing that skill. So you don't ever want to teach it with just one person, because then they're potentially only going to be able to do it with that one person. So make sure when you do role play that you try to include different people for that. All right, this is the big one. Who has sensory issues? And that's just like one of your biggest things with your like kids. Like it just rocks your world. You're like, not today. Yeah, just put on the shirt. I'm sorry it's red or scratchy. So these tend to be a big thing with kiddos on the spectrum. But if I'm being honest, I have lots of sensory issues and needs myself. I think we all do. And for me, this is one of the things that I can most easily relate to. I've learned with individuals on the spectrum. I'm okay with lights. Although I do think working with individuals with autism, I have learned to dislike some of these like overhead fluorescent lights. I never knew that they like hummed and did all these flashy things until I started modifying therapy rooms and classrooms, and I was never around it anymore. And then I go in my new office and I turn it on and I'm like, no, I'm just going to use a lamp today, thanks. Because now it bothers me. It's fabulous. I love them for it. But I have a thing with sounds. So I'm okay with loud sounds. I'm okay with a variety of sounds. But I cannot stand if the TV is too loud and then one of my children is trying to ask me a question while the other one's trying to tell me where he's going, while my husband is knocking on the door to get my attention, and then the microwave is beeping because the green beans are done, and then the dog barks, and God bless the dog, he's about to get kicked if you don't move. So I can't hurt the children, so poor dog. Maybe there's a spoon that's going to get tossed. I don't know, but I just can't do too many sounds at once. That's really overstimulating for me. I also don't like scratchy sweaters. If I ever get a tag and I think I've cut it out, but I've missed one little piece and it's rubbing my neck all day, like I might be bound and determined to go to Walmart to get a new shirt before the day is over, because I'm not going to concentrate in my meetings if I'm being stabbed by a tag. And then even things like touch. So if I'm sad or if I'm happy, like I love a good hug. I'm a hugger. I like to hug. But if I'm mad, please do not hug me. If I'm mad and you try to hug me to make me feel better, I might have to elbow you. You're going to have to get up out of my space. So even the things that sometimes I like, there are other situations where I don't like. And kids on the spectrum just seem to be much more perceptive to these kinds of things. So some of those examples we talked about, so like lights. Fluorescent lights tend to be an issue for a lot of individuals. I will say that with a lot of fluorescent lights, they're changing the bulbs to LED lights, and that seems to be an improvement for some individuals. Not for everybody. Sometimes it's still just too bright. Noises. A lot of kids don't like loud noises, we find, especially things like sirens that are not expected. They're very abrupt and very loud. Sometimes we have to do programming for this, and a lot of times, unfortunately, it's desensitization. So we start off with a quiet little fire truck, and then we turn up the volume on the fire truck a little bit louder. I still don't like it because I just eventually gets to that level where they're like, oh my God, and I'm like, 30 seconds and you can have another Skittle. Like, here you go. But sometimes that's the best method that you have. But we do have like things that you can utilize, like earbuds and headphones, and thankfully now every kid wants to walk around with their Beats on, and so if they got their headphones, they don't look any different than anybody else in the crowd these days. So at least that helps with normalization. Sometimes, I know these are classroom pictures, but sometimes just spacing and arrangement of rooms and stuff can make a really big difference for these individuals. Some people like to be the squeezed. They like the pressure. They like to feel safe and cozy. Other kids are going to tornado you out of their way. So if you can kind of develop like, okay, so this is going to be John's area. Sister, nope, that's not your beanbag. Don't even touch it. That's his, okay? He needs his space. But she can have a pink one right over here in the other corner. So just think about those kinds of things. Do they need space? Do they need to be, more cozy and confined? Sequencing can also be important. So again, this is like a classroom picture, but it helps. So if you can sort of set up your home so the kid walks in, I know that here's the spot. Immediately I'm supposed to hang up my backpack and my shoes go onto that thing, and then from there I'm kind of directed into the kitchen where I'm going to go and have my snack, and then when I'm done with my snack I'm going to throw it away by the trash can, and the trash can just happens to be by the little desk in the living room where I'm going to do my homework, so I can just sit on down. So not every environment can be modified that way, but if you can think through some of those things sometimes, it really does make a big difference to lead them to the next thing. Or if it can't be set up that way, if they know that I put off my shoes, then you could have a visual there that says snack time, and that would prompt them to go to the kitchen, and then you could tell them, hey, all right, time for homework, and they could go up to their homework desk, and maybe they have a visual there for their afternoon schedule. So there's ways to work around it. And I also like this picture because it has the puffy little jackets, so I can get a twofer out of this picture. But textures tend to be a thing for a lot of individuals on and off the spectrum. Some kids want things really soft, some want hard, some want crunchy. We see this a lot with food, not just clothing. A lot of these kids have very, very picky diets. So we can try things like new food. Talking about visuals again, sometimes we have these little mats where you build a picture with food, then you eat it. Sometimes, I know we're not supposed to play with our food, but sometimes playing with your food gets kids to eat the food. I can tell you one story. I had one time, I had a kiddo that diet, we just could not expand the diet for the life of us, so we were trying to add in some like vitamins to the diet to at least supplement nutritional needs. And so we were like, okay, touch the dinosaur. Okay, touch it to your mouth, lick the dinosaur. Like trying to go through this whole little process. And he never wanted to get it to his face. He would touch it, he would pick it up, he would smell it, but he never wanted to do anything with his mouth with it. And so one day we were like playing with dinosaurs, and I made my gummy, like knock his gummy off the table, and then I was like, "Rawr," and I was like bit its head off. And he thought it was the funniest thing. So then he grabbed a dinosaur and bit its head off. And so we took half vitamins. And that was fine, because he would bite off 3 heads, and that was okay. So Mom was okay with that, and that's how we took our vitamins. We bit the heads off of dinosaurs. But it was a modification that worked for him. Sometimes with these sensory issues, we then find that they turn into safety issues. As you can imagine, like for kids with sound sensitivities, if a big siren comes by, I may want to do everything I can in the world to get away from that siren, and I'm going to dart across the street, whether that's safe or not. Maybe they like things that are soft, or maybe they have like a water infatuation, and I see a pool over there, or I see a big fluffy dog over there, so I'm going to run to it. So it could be that they're trying to they're having an aversion and they want to run away from something, or it could be that it's like a sensory excitement and they want to run to it, but obviously it makes safety issues. So keep those things in mind. Like I talked about, you can have stop signs. Obviously we have child-proofing things like doorknobs. They have like the little latch locks at the top so that you don't have to actually lock the door, but they can't reach the latches and things like that for safety as well. I also have a number of safety resources up here on the table. There's like some wandering prevention checklists. There's like some home checklists that you can look at too, if that's something that you want to look at. There's different types of ID ideas that you can use. There's everything from tracking bracelets through things like Project Lifesaver. There's also like shoe tags and bracelets that you could get that you could put like your phone number on if you needed to. There's little tattoos that you can order. They're like personalized temporary tattoos that you can put your phone number on if you're going to go somewhere. And I always tell families, worst case scenario, if you're going to Disney World and you've lost your bracelet or whatever it may be, just break out the Sharpie. Just write on them. That's okay. Like, it's a tattoo. Just tell them it's a tattoo. Get the blue Sharpie. Whatever works for them. And similarly, just another fun tip. We tell families a lot, we get a lot of bad weather up here, especially during tornado season. We encourage families, if you think that there might be a danger coming your way, if you have nothing else that you can think of to do to try to keep your kiddo safe, or you're afraid you might get separated or anything like that, break out the duct tape, put a good piece of duct tape on the back of their shirt, write their name, write your name, your phone number, their address. That way, if something happens and you do get separated, or maybe something happens to you and you're unconscious and somebody walks up and they find your child, whether they're verbal or not, that's very traumatic, and now there's all these new people in their face and they may not be able to respond just because of anxiety. But if they have that on the back, it's a starting place for an emergency responder. So just another idea. And then also, because the kids do have these sensory needs, sometimes if we meet those needs before those behaviors kind of show themselves, it can help a lot. It's not a fix for everything. I have some examples I'll show you when I get done, because I can't twofer at the moment. I can't multitask that well. But I have a couple of things I'll show you, and then there's a couple of little handouts up here on the table. There's one for some sensory ideas that you can do at home that are really simple. There's another one for making your own scented Play-Dohs at home. Play-Doh's not for everybody, I know, but it kind of meets the textile input that they're looking for sometimes, as well as like olfactory input. So it's kind of fun. They're seasonal, so it's things like pumpkin and cinnamon, but you can check those out. But by giving them these tools, then sometimes they can learn to cope and de-escalate before they get to full meltdown. But those are just some tips and tricks. Obviously, there's more than that at any point, but sometimes services help. So I'm going to go through our services really quickly, just so you kind of know what we offer, just because we're a little bit different. I know that kiddos that are going to be in adoptive and foster families do have Medicaid coverage. They can have dual coverage as well. But our services are developed particularly to try to meet needs of those underserved kiddos. So we serve individuals birth through age 21, so up to their 21st birthday. We're hoping that that's the first thing that we'll be able to expand. We're currently still under supervision as part of the settlement agreement, so we can't change anything about our services right now. But as soon as that's lifted, we're hoping to also lift the age cap at least a little bit, because we know at 21, basically everything disappears. All the services disappear. You no longer have supports from school anymore. You're having to transition from like pediatrics to like family practice, which can cause a huge disruption in what services you have access to, and somebody trying to learn your child all over again. So, but 0 to 21, we do home and community-based services. So it's services that come to you. You're not going to another clinic or another appointment to get these services. And they're made for individuals who have a diagnosis of autism and also Medicaid coverage. So with these services, you're not competing with all the other private insurances or like those limited slots that you see at community providers. And hopefully it's something that would be new as far as the things that are available to you. So how many people have kiddos that have maladaptive behaviors, autism or not? Get a good tantrum now and then. You probably feel like you're often in the spotlight, and it's not the spotlight that you want to be in. So one of the services that we offer is behavior support. It's to address maladaptive behaviors, everything from aggression to self-injurious behaviors to tantrums to elopement, whatever your problem behavior may be. And some of the providers are ABA providers, but it's not limited to ABA. So there are psychologists who can do this. There are providers that can be overseen by psychiatrists or BCBAs that can do this. But it's always centered on best practices and targeted behaviors for reduction. We also do therapeutic mentoring. If you're familiar with ABA, I like to say that behavior supports behavior reduction, and therapeutic mentoring is more the skill acquisition side of that. So it's really just building skills. It's skill development, it's skill enhancement. All of the skills that you want to target is determined by what is best for your child and your family. We don't necessarily determine it by an assessment. That's the great thing that Medicaid's allowed with this service. It doesn't have to be assessment supported. But it's a support coaching training model. Again, these may be ABA providers. They may not be ABA providers, again, but best practices. So they have to use some kind of proven method to work with your child. We're not experimenting on your children. And then we know with a lot of kiddos on the spectrum, they have comorbid or co-occurring diagnoses. So things like anxiety, depression, ODD, OCD, ADHD. Any of you know that kid? Maybe all of the above. So just like everybody else, they have good days and bad days, but sometimes when they're having a bad day or if they're really worked up, even if it's one of the other diagnoses that's causing it, the autism kind of prevents that de-escalation or the regulation of the emotions. So they need extra support for that. So our services actually have a mental health component for our kiddos. They get services. It's a variety of behavioral and mental health approaches. Again, they are all scientific and evidence-based, but they take in a lot of autism-specific considerations as well. So we have people that also can do this mental health support or in-home therapy for individuals who don't even have verbal communication skills, which a lot of times you go into the community and they're like, oh, okay, well, they can't talk. So there's something that we can really do as far as like counseling and mental health. Unless you're lucky to find a play therapist, they're limited in Huntsville. So that's another option. And then how many of you are taking care of these kiddos in your gas tank? That little light's just a shining. Yeah, story of my life. But we also have a service for you. It's called Family Peer Support. So when that little gas light is shining, it's somebody that can help you come along, work through things from a shared perspective. And sometimes they can also help with like systems navigation. So you now need to learn about waiver, or you need to learn about IEPs. And so they can pair up with you and be like, this is what I've done, or I've walked this before, and this is how it's going to be successful. Similarly, we have this service for individuals as well. The youth peer supports, I try to think back, like when I was a kid or a teenager, I didn't want my mom's opinion on anything. She was dumb. So looking back, she was not so dumb after all. But in the moment, I didn't want to hear what my mom had to say or my dad had to say or my brother had to say. I wanted to hear what somebody else like me had to say, like my friends. So this is kind of like a built-in peer or a friend for those individuals. And they can help them just, again, like the family peer experience-based. When we get providers for this, we're looking for individuals who have lived experience either with autism or they're closely related to somebody with autism, so maybe a sibling or something like that. We actually have one of these signing up now to do this. We haven't had this service yet, so we have an individual who is actually on the spectrum. He will actually be graduating college next month. He came and talked to us, and he wants to be able to provide this service. So we're actually really excited to have somebody. And I think once you get one in, then it'll be easier to get more people to sign up. And then psychoeducation. So obviously you guys like to come to educational events. I know one, you have to, but two, I'm sure it helps out a lot. So we also have psychoeducational services. So when you are in the dark and you just need somebody to shine a little light, help you find the way again, they can do training on whatever topic is good for you. It can be learning more about autism. It can be how can I better use visuals in my home. It can be how can I just be a better parent. How can I deal with my own anxiety in order to better support my kiddo. So whatever topic works for you, whatever needs that you're having then, that's what training topics can be geared towards. We have one family right now. Mom has recently gotten the children back. They were in DHR custody. She has some not so great coping skills, and so she's trying to learn parenting, and the kid's already like 7, and so they also have autism, and she's just jumping into a whole new world, while also trying to stabilize herself as well in the community. And she's like, I just don't even know what to feed her. She's like, all I ever know to do is just make SpaghettiOs. And she's just gaining weight, and the doctor told me she's just fat, and I don't know what to do. And so Mom's just really stressed out about SpaghettiOs. And we were like, girl, no problem. So we're going to teach you about this little food plate and the pyramid, and we're going to get you some recipes for quick dinners you can do in 15 minutes with 3 ingredients or less because you're on a budget. So that's one of her goals right now, is just to get psychoeducation on just how to improve nutrition, how to also improve exercise, things that they can do together as well to also build the relationship while they're getting healthier. So it's really, really able to be individualized. And then what I think is one of the best services is that you also get an intensive care coordinator, and that's the very first thing you get when you come into services. And it's somebody to connect you to our services, to help you make a plan, but also to continue to help you connect to the community. They're that person that can help you make that visual schedule, because I'm sure you've got all day to just sit around at home and make that visual schedule I talked about. You got hours to Google, and your printer never breaks down or you don't run out of ink or anything. So, but they can do all that for you. So you can sit down like, girl, I got to have a visual schedule. Like bedtime is a nightmare, and this is his teddy bear. I'll send you a picture of it, but I need you to tell him that he needs to brush his teeth, and he needs to get a drink of water, and then he needs to get Mr. Teddy. I'll read him one story, and then he can have one more drink of water, and then he's going to bed. I'm turning off the lights, and we're going to shut the door. And they can Google all those pictures. They can walk around your house and take a picture of your sink and your door, and then take it back to work and put it together for you. They can make the social story for you. So it's really broad. So we can get you services, and we can just get you those day-to-day lifelines that you need in your house. But that's what they're there for. They do like a face-to-face visit usually once a month, just to make sure that you're all good, you're okay. If face-to-face doesn't work, we'll Zoom, we'll FaceTime you, whatever it needs to be. But then they're also usually calling you like 2 times a month. If you need more, they'll call you 6 times a month. Like they'll meet you where you are on that. But it's just somebody to kind of come along that ride with you. They'll even go to IEP meetings. I don't know if any of you go to IEP meeting and you're like, either one, I don't know what they're talking about, or if that teacher looks at me condescendingly, one more time, my child is not going to be going to school here. I am not dumb. So, but it's somebody else that can go with you that has a title. That's all it takes sometimes, but they can also be the person that's like, okay, well, Mom, what we're going to do, we'll ask for a continuation, and then we're just going to call ADAP, okay? And then you're not the bad guy, your ICC is the bad guy. And then maybe you have to call ADAP, maybe you say that, and they're like, oh, hang on, well, I think that we might could get one more speech session in here. So they're the good guy, the bad guy, the creator of all the things. There are flyers about our services up here. We have a 1-800 number you can call. You can email us anytime. I also have cards that I'll put up there if you don't want to go through our 1-800 number. If you just want to get with me, you can get with me. Because even if you apply, eventually your application comes back to me. So I can help you with that. But the main thing I want to highlight is this bottom line here. So whether or not you want to do our services, whether or not you have Medicaid, whether or not you are 37 or 58, it doesn't matter. You can call us and we'll still help you connect to any kind of community resource or supports or services. If you're like, I heard about this waiver thing, I don't know what it is, you can call us, we'll tell you about waiver. It varies even by what county you live in now. So we can give information and referral to anybody, like anybody at all. My favorite story, I have to tell you all this. I had a lady that called me one time and she needed some resources. And I was like, okay, awesome, like where do you live? And she's like, well, I live in Morgan County. I'm like, okay, so are you wanting like ABA? Are you looking for some kind of testing? She's like, yes. She's like, it's like some like letters or something. And I was like, ASD maybe? Like that's how they abbreviate autism sometimes. And she's like, no. And she's like, STD. That's what I need. That's what it is. And I was like, okay, girl, hang on 1 second. And we got the health department and we hooked her up. So whatever your need is, we got you. We won't just tell you, sorry, not us, and hang up the phone. I know that happens a lot, so we don't want to do that to you. So we'll try anything that we can do. So just some examples so you know about what we can refer you to. There's an autism identification card. I don't know if any of you guys know about that, but there's a form up here, so apply for it as well. It's like a $10 fee. Your pediatrician signs the form, and it's this card that's a state identification card, and it just says that you have autism. You can present it somewhere, especially like if you had an individual that drives and they get pulled over and they're like, I can't breathe, I can't talk, this is not going to go well. They can give them this little yellow card, and then the police are instantly like, oh, okay, so I need to redirect how I'm going to approach this situation. They may ask, do you have somebody you want me to call? Things like that to work through the situation. So there's information about that. There's also Project Lifesaver. I don't know if you guys know about that, but it's like a tracking program that is free for individuals. I put the Madison County contact on the sheet just in case any of you guys need that. There's also something called the Big Red Safety Box. Do any of you know about Big Red Safety Box? So if you go on the website, I think currently it's like there's one box and it'll say like an $8 donation, but you can just like scroll through the different options because there's a school box and an emergency responder box, and then you can get to a version that's like the free box. It's the same stuff. They just want to know why, like what hardship you may have, and you could just be like, foster family, child on Medicaid, and you can get a free box. But inside it has like a voucher to get either like an ID bracelet or a shoe tag. It has, I think, 2 door/window alarms that you can put on. So if you've got a child that likes to go, at least you'll get a warning that they went. Because of little things like those stop signs, like I was talking about, some different safety tools, emergency responder forms, things like that. The University of Alabama has a new program. It's called PAL. It's a parenting assistance line. You can text it, which is really great because you may have to be like texting it, having a meltdown while you're still having to like bathe your child, wrangle them into the pajamas, whatever it may be. But they can be somewhere that you can text for either just some tips and advice or just a place to vent as well. Where you're just like, I just can't do it right now. They can kind of just talk you down from that. It's completely anonymous. The Regional Autism Network, I don't know if you guys know about that as well. It's another referral source that you can utilize. I have a flyer about them. Tennessee Valley Unite is a Facebook group that I refer a lot of families to, just because you can go on there and say, hey, I'm looking for a new pediatrician. Has anybody ever done any genetic testing? What is your opinion about XYZ dentist? And they can give you information and feedback on that. I can give it to you all day long from my professional perspective, or when I went and toured the office, how great it looked, or feedback that I've gotten from families, but I think sometimes having that personal experience is helpful. Understood.org is just a website where you can type in what age of a kid, what troubles you're having, whether it's anxiety, homework help, whatever it may be, and it can just give you personalized information about different situations, techniques that you might want to try. NetSmarts it's a little website. It has different games and videos kids can watch and play about internet safety, everything from like cyberbullying to identity theft to grooming, and it's geared by ages, so it's like 0 to 3, 5 to 8, I think it's like 9 to 11, and so it's broken down, so we're not teaching 12-year-olds the same thing we're trying to tell a 3-year-old. It's usually not the same level of content that we want to share. So that was something new that we found. I'm going to show you some materials really fast in just a second, but a lot of the things that we get come from things like Therapy Vaults, or the OT Toolbox. They have a lot of free resources. So if you want to check out those websites, if there's something that you want to quick pull to try to implement in your house, I will tell you Therapy Vault usually has like a big Black Friday sale where you can get anything on the site for free for like 24 hours. So, good place to go on Black Friday. Usually goes through the weekend. If you don't know, on the Medicaid website, the Alabama Medicaid website, if you go to the very end of this title bar on the right-hand side, there's a provider portal or a provider search. You can enter in what kind of provider you're looking for, what county you're looking for it in, and it'll come up with providers in that area if they take Medicaid, and it'll also show if they're currently accepting new patients. Sometimes we utilize this in the office to try to give families fewer numbers to call because we don't want you calling 15 offices that are going to go, oh, we're full, we're full, we're full. You don't have time for that. So, and then 988 is the new suicide crisis prevention line if you don't know that. So we always just want to share that. So hopefully you guys are ready to blast off to success with these kiddos now. I can either take questions first or I can show you my fun tools and toys first. Do you guys have a preference? Toys? Okay, I can show you some toys. All right. Okay, so I may just have to stretch for this one. So I was talking about visuals and also sensory. So this is one of the things that, this one came from the OT Toolbox that I was talking about. But these are some visuals that we have up. Sometimes when we go to events, we'll do like a sensory room at some events. And so these are little step-by-steps. So the first one is that you trace it and breathe it. So they do a little breathing exercise. And then I think, jumping jacks. So then they get some gross motor and proprioceptive. And then we can do wall push-ups for more of that proprioceptive, and it's another calm down. And then we're going to leap like a squirrel to get a little bit more energy, and then we're going to breathe it back out. And that works for some kids. So just an example of a tool that you can get. Sometimes when you are teaching a kid a new skill, you want to really reinforce what they're doing. So sometimes we use things called token economies. You guys ever heard of those? So this one came from Therapy Vault that I showed you a while ago, but this one's a train. They have space ones, cat ones, dog ones. If your kid's got an interest, it's probably on there. But they also have them like 3 tokens, 5 tokens, 10 tokens, whatever level your kiddo is at. This is an example of like a first in schedule that I was telling you about. This one is free on Therapy Vault. I like free. And then these were some pictures. So these were like different pictures you could have for going to bed, like a bedtime routine or studying. And then these are the things that maybe you could earn. This is similar to one of those little schedules I was showing you, but it's like a to-do and then done. So sometimes kids like to scooch stuff over. So a lot of times you could laminate this, get you some little Velcro dots, put them on there, and then they could just move it over from I did it to it's done now. And then again, it's just little pictures. And then here's an example of a social story. This one's about having fun during the holidays. Another thing that I like about Therapy Vault is a lot of their materials, like if it's a social story, there are kids of all genders, there's kids of all like races and ethnic backgrounds. So you can even find a story of a kid that looks like your kid. And I think sometimes that just means a lot more to these kiddos. But as you can see, it's just kind of little step-by-step pictures. And what I'll do with these, I'll put them up here, and I don't need to take these back, so you guys can race to the death. So who gets to take them home? Or Brandon can take them maybe, I don't know. Whatever you guys want to do, I'll share this.
Well, if they were left out, they could take a picture of it.
Yes, and then you know what, you can go to the website and download it. So help yourself. Just some cheap sensory ideas. Like I told you about those little sensory stations that you can have for kids to help them. So this is just a water bottle with food coloring and water. You can put soap in it or vegetable oil and it will slow it down if you got a kid that wants slower stuff. This one just has glitters and noodles and popcorn in it. It was from a Halloween event, so this was like bones and teeth. Dollar Tree glow sticks can be really fun for these kiddos. You can turn off the lights and they kind of just like to watch the lights glow. Putting them in the bathtub, you can have a fun glow party in the tub. You can also get squeeze balls, basically any resource fair or doctor's office that you go to, or you can make your own. I'm sure that you guys probably have like balloons laying around the house, or you can go to the Dollar Tree. This one has Play-Doh in it. I'll put it up here. You guys can play with it. This one has flour. And then this one just has sprinkles, like birthday cake sprinkles. So worst case scenario, the Play-Doh probably, I don't want them to eat, but it's non-toxic. So even if they break these open and eat something, they're safe. We have lots of kids that like beans. I don't know what it is about it, but a box of beans with just a bunch of, you got Happy Meal toys laying around the house, or you used to have like a set of Army Men and now you're down to like one headless one or whatever it may be. Throw them in some beans. Kids will play with it for long periods of time. Give them a spoon. They can dig in it too. I took these to a recent event just to put on the table because I knew kids would be waiting as they also walked through the lines. And I had kids that actually asked me if they could take home a handful of beans just so they could play with them. So beans, like 67 cents at Walmart, you know, real cheap. And if you have a kid that doesn't like beans, sometimes these little soft cushy balls, you can make a bin of those instead. If you are a Play-Doh friendly household, you can also make a cheap little bin with just like some googly eyes and pipe cleaners. They can build little monsters. Sometimes you can hide stuff in the Play-Doh and have them find it, and they'll sit there and they can calm down doing stuff like that, or also work on fine motor skills. If fine motor is something you need, or you just need a sit down task, you can also, oh, sorry guys, you can also you can have any kind of picture. You can have ladybugs, whatever. And I know that we don't really use clothespins that much anymore in the real world, so you can get them at the Dollar Tree, real cheap. But you can just have them clip it on like each spider web, each eyeball, each whatever. And then they're working on fine motor, they're working on counting, they're sitting down, they're being still, they're calming down. Okay, my last little box, sorry guys. Also, things like lacing cards are good for that too, if you just need them to sit down and work on some fine motor. Ice cubes, especially if they can be outside, or if you've got like a little bin or a bowl that they can play in. These kids like to play with ice cubes. You can freeze things into the ice cubes and they will like work them out of it. They can dig at it. If it's summertime and you need to kill some time and you need them to sit still on the porch for a minute, you can get a big bowl, throw a couple cars or dinosaurs or whatever in it, make them chisel it out. But big bowls, it's a big chunk of ice. We talked about lights. So you can always do cool sunglasses to help with that. Ball caps are also great. Fidget toys, I have a number of those that you can check out. There's like some stretchy bands that you can use. Dollar Tree special, so real cheap. Things like dreidels, like that. We talked about earbuds and headphones can be good for noise cancellation, especially if you want to play music through it, if music is also additionally calming for them. And then this came from Oriental Trading Company. I had like a bag of like 144 for like $8 or something. But especially in the classroom, things like that. It's a bracelet, so they can put the bracelet on, and then if they need to fidget or something, they can just play with the zipper on their arm, so it's not even an extra thing. It's attached to them. Maybe they won't lose it. And then slap bracelets. I don't know if any of you are like 80s, 90s kids and like love a good slap bracelet. But with slap bracelets, you can get some good tactile input. You can also sometimes get like sound if it's a really good one and it makes the slappy sound. Some of them are like really shiny and visual, so you can get visual sensory and stuff. I like this one. I got this at a resource fair one time. It has built-in picture communication on it. So if you're going somewhere, they can point to the pictures while it's on their bracelet. But so those are just some ideas. Like I said, there's more ideas over here on the table. I'll have these up here too, so you guys can grab and play and touch and all the things. But if you have questions, I'm happy to hopefully answer whatever question you may have. Sure.
Are there any statistics, or do you know personally of children, autistic children, how many are born with them that have a medical diagnosis, and how many are caused? You mentioned trauma earlier, so I've got to thinking, what percentage are environmental after birth, after they are born, and how many are have that condition at birth?
So I don't have have a number for you. I can tell you about the research that's ongoing. So it's been a project for several years that lots of places are trying to figure out what causes autism. They've come to find that it seems to be a multitude of things. So there may be a genetic cause or at least a genetic predisposition that may play a role in that, but there also seems to be some environmental factors that also increase the likelihood of it becoming more prevalent or developing. Autism is a developmental disorder, so it does have to manifest during the developmental period. Some things will say before age 18, some diagnostics look at things like before age 8, or some pediatricians will even ask you like, well, before they were 3, did you see any of these things? And you kind of have to think back. Doctors now should be doing what we call the MChat. It's a screener at 18 and 24, sometimes even 36-month appointments. If they're not doing it, you can ask them to. It's also a free tool that you can get offline if you want to do it yourself, if you have concerns, and then you can take it to the doctor and be like, hey, got some questions. But they're also developing more and more diagnostic tools to even look at kids now 12 to 18 months old to see if they have autism. So we really haven't been able to diagnose before 12 to 18 months until now. And so I think as we can get better tools and find better indicators, we'll be able to determine that earlier. But right now we just don't have a way to know. Anybody else? You guys just want to play with my toys?
What kind of services are available for non-Medicaid, high-functioning autism?
A little more limited, but still ABA tends to be an option for a lot of those individuals. There's a lot of new providers coming into the area right now that are doing more job preparation, but you can get some services through CRS sometimes, voc rehab, but they're limited to their programming. I don't want to diss anybody because I know lots of those programs do have really good providers, high constraints.
0 supports, and that's a really big struggle because we're kind of in between
That gap.
that gap there where there's really hardly anything out there, and for having someone who needs help, where it's maybe the peer monitoring of mentorship or another young adult worker or something like that, where parents aren't always the ones saying, this needs to be changed.
You smell a little funny.
Yeah. We should have it more than once a week, and what
Yes.
we need to do independently, kind of thing. So
I do know there's some churches that are trying to start some social groups as well. I actually got a text about it this morning. They wanted to know kind of like what do we think is a good area for it. So I know that there's some groups that are trying to do some of that peer support group type thing. I know some of the places that do job coaching also have like social skills groups, like Dungeons and Dragons, one of them does. I don't know some of the other ones. But there's also some local businesses that do like some social nights. So it might be something that you could get plugged into. But if you want to email, I can get you we can pull together a list. Also, one of the individuals that works in our office has I think he's 19, he just turned 20, but her son is actually on the spectrum. And so she's found a lot of new resources recently for us for that age group. He drives, he goes to college, that kind of thing. So we're learning more and more about that, but Huntsville is also getting more and more of those resources as we're growing. Shocker, we have a lot of people moving in with autism, so we're having to better support it, which again, kind of like my job coming about as a settlement agreement. It's unfortunate, but I'm glad it's finally getting here. But if you want to email me, I'll get you my card and we can get you a list. That's the information and referral. We'll do it all day long. Anybody else?
Along those same lines, like high functioning, I feel like there's a lot for individuals with autism that are more lower functioning. But I feel like the higher functioning, like there's the Riley Center and there's this and that. But if you're kind of on that, like, we don't have Medicaid and we're, higher functioning, it's just not like schools. I feel like school is a big thing because he doesn't really qualify for Riley Center, but traditional school is not necessarily a good fit either, and so we kind of bounced around, like trying different things for him. But is there anything you know of, like schools that are more autism friendly? Maybe. I mean, I know they're not going to be.
Sometimes some private schools can do better at accommodating because they have smaller class sizes. There are some public schools that are better than others, and sometimes the school system's really good at that, and then they have staff changes, and then you moved into an area because like, this is where to live, and now it's not. So you can't relocate all the time. I get that. We do tell families though a lot of times like private schools do better. There was a school that was here, it was called Foster Academy, but they're no longer.
We actually looked into that, and then they closed. So.
Yeah, they're no longer in. Sometimes too with private schools, they'll let you, because of the smaller structure and more flexibility, they'll also let you bring in aides sometimes more. So even if he had, even if he had like a ABA tutor that they even worked with like once a week for 2 hours, sometimes schools that are private schools will allow them to come there and do it. It benefits the individual because they can get peer inclusion and support. Some kids don't like it because then they're like, why do you got the person with you? But it just depends, like on the individual. But sometimes the schools like it when they come in because it's also a benefit for the school. They can get extra training while they're there. They can also have somebody that's also more hands-on. It takes a staffing ease for them. But right now there's not a lot. There was a community connections meeting that I went to this morning, and there's a new school that's going to be opening, I think, next year. We had Huntsville Achievement School or Academy, but this is kind of coming along, I don't know, in place of or alongside. I didn't get to get a whole lot of information because we were in passing, so I got the card. I'm getting more information on that. So if you want to reach out, as I get more information, if it's something that is a fit for that, I'll be happy to pass that along too. But it's a gap. If it's any consolation, Alabama schools as a state are developing an autism academy for all of their teachers that they're going to require in the future. So I think that'll be a good support. I also have a tool, if you'll email me, it's like questions you should ask. And I have one for like EBA providers, respite providers, summer camps, schools, like all kinds of different things. So if you want like an interview cheat sheet, I can hook you up with an interview cheat sheet at least. Anybody else? I can throw my toys up there so that you guys can start wrapping up, but then if you have questions, feel free just to grab me.